Let's think a little bit about when the book of Deuteronomy was composed. If a person wanted to, they could try and date the composition of the book of Deuteronomy to very early on, maybe even to the 15th century BCE when the story is actually set, by comparing it to Hittite vassal treaties. The Hittite Empire existed between the 17th and the 12th centuries BCE in Anatolia. Every time they would conquer a group of people, they would write up a treaty with them that outlined the terms of their subjugation. Two recurring structural features of these Hittite treaties is that they begin with a historical prologue, which outlines the relationship between the Hittites and the subjugated people up until that point, and they often conclude with a call for witnesses, usually gods, to come along and witness the institution of the treaty. Lo and behold, the text of Deuteronomy has these peculiar features as well. It actually has two historical prologues, one in chapters 1 through 3 and a second between chapters 9 and 10. And it also has a call for witnesses, not other gods in this case, but the heavens and earth itself at the end of chapter 30. So since there seems to be a direct influence of these Hittite treaties on the text of Deuteronomy, and since these Hittite treaties are no longer known or available for anybody to see after the 12th century BCE, it seems like Deuteronomy must have been composed prior to this point. And if the Hittite treaties were the only point of comparison that we had, this would be a very strong argument for the dating of the book of Deuteronomy. But we do have something else to look at. In the year 672 BCE, Esarhaddon, king of the Neo-Assyrian Empire, composed a succession treaty that went on public display. He outlined the terms of the succession of the empire to his son Ashurbanipal. Now, Esarhaddon himself had a very contested succession, and he wanted to make sure that there was a smooth transition to his favored son after him. And so he composed a succession treaty to make sure that that happened. Now, the succession treaty has several things in common with these earlier Hittite treaties, but it also has two additional peculiar features. Number one, Esarhaddon's succession treaty has a provision for its public display so that everybody can see what's on the document. It also has a provision for its public reading upon the death of Esarhaddon and the transition of power to his son, Ashurbanipal, just in case anybody had any questions about what's in the document. Lo and behold, we get a provision for the public display of the law in the book of Deuteronomy in chapter 27, and we also have a provision for its public reading upon the death of Moses and succession to Joshua in Deuteronomy 31. Number two, Esarhaddon's succession treaty also has an extensive list of individualized and ritualistically formatted blessings and curses for those who uphold or fail to uphold the treaty, and we get those also in Deuteronomy's chapter 27 and 28. Because the book of Deuteronomy shares these peculiar features in common with Esarhaddon's succession treaty, it seems like it must have been composed shortly after it in the top half of the 7th century BCE. If you're interested in this argument or the underlying archaeological evidence, I would recommend you pick up a book by Jeffrey Stacker called Deuteronomy and the Pentateuch, which lays this out in a lot more detail.